Hey everybody, it's Tim Ashe, President of the Vermont State Senate. It is Friday, April 17th. Thanks for joining me for my daily update on Vermont's response and progress addressing the COVID-19 crisis. I had intended today to dedicate the whole time to recognizing people who work in the mental health profession throughout the state, and decided I'm going to postpone that till Tuesday of next week because the governor issued some important new guidance today through a revision of his executive order, and I want to make sure that I communicate that now before the weekend. As I have mentioned, I'm going to be taking the weekend off, so I'll be on a Monday to Friday schedule. On Monday, I'm going to be responding entirely to questions that have come up over the course of the week and obviously a little bit over the weekend. Tuesday, I'm going to talk about people in the mental health profession and how they've been stepping up beyond their normal call of duty over the last month plus. Wednesday, I'm going to have a special guest who I will announce early in the week, and we'll take the rest of the week from there. Quick update on the numbers of cases in the state. There were 9 positive tests added to the total today. So we've been, instead of the 20, 30, 40, 50 a day we were getting early in this crisis, the last few days have been 4, 7, 9, 9. And the number of people who have died with COVID-19 remains at 35. The number who are hospitalized either with COVID-19 or suspected of having COVID-19, meaning they just haven't had a positive test yet, hovers in the high 50s, which is about half of what we had projected earlier on had we not taken a number of the more aggressive measures that have been taken to protect people. So obviously people who are hospitalized with COVID-19, it's very serious, and we hope they all get better and are able to exit the hospital. But that number has remained fairly steady now in the high 50s, low 60s for a number of days, which is why we're referring to it as a plateau. Before I turn to the governor's announcements today, the health department has a very easy to take in graphic on their website. If you go to the health department's website in Vermont and click on the COVID-19 page, first thing that pops up, depending on your browser, is a very helpful infographic of the distribution of positive cases in the by county in the state, and then you can scan around and see it by age, by gender, and now they have collected and reported information based on race. And across the country and here in Vermont, this has been a very important issue because, like many pandemics and viruses and diseases, COVID-19 across the country is impacting people of color far greater, and some communities have really been ravaged by it. In Vermont, the question has been, what is the racial composition of COVID-19 patients? And the health department's data collection, they were so busy responding to the urgency of the actual healthcare that at first the data was not really sufficient to tell people what race the patients in Vermont were. They were able to go back and connect patient records with racial composition. So now they are able to present the racial demographics of COVID-19 patients. And I know that many people were wanting to make sure that we were keeping track of that so it could help inform our overall public health measures. So take a look and drop me a note if you have trouble finding that. The governor today issued, I don't know what quite to describe it as, maybe like a challenge or a deadline to his own Department of Labor. Effectively, what he said was, if they do not get through the vast majority of cases, the backlog that they've been facing of problem enrollments in the unemployment system, that he would make a decision by tomorrow night, Saturday night, to authorize basically the cutting of checks of $1,200 to go out to the people who are still waiting for their first benefits. He's hopeful that his team will get through the backlog, but I view that with some skepticism. So they're planning, working with the treasurer, to start sending out checks and then reconcile things afterwards. But $1,200 is the amount that they've announced. They haven't provided a lot of specificity about exactly who would get the check, what that would mean if you're already receiving benefits but not the right amount. So there's a lot of unknowns, but I think the governor is hearing many of our call, saying that what has been put forth so far is not sufficient, that there need to be more resources to get people the cash they desperately need. And hopefully this will help get the money out faster. And I'm hopeful, because everything that they've touched as it relates to the unemployment system, I want it to work. We all want it to work, because that means people are getting the money they need. But I will continue to advocate, as I did today with the governor's top staff, for more resources than what they are pledging to provide in terms of call takers and so on, because these waits are just not acceptable. And so as legislators, our job is to advocate on the policy side and to encourage the resource allocation, and hopefully we'll see some progress there. The $1,200 checks could go out as early as the beginning of next week, but I am not going to encourage people to count on anything at this point in light of what we've been going through. So now I want to transition to the governor's major announcement today. And a friend actually sent me something today of a relatively well-known business owner in another state who, in encouraging and creating a workplace culture, talks about the importance of hope as an energizing factor, a force to give everyone a sense of purpose, something to look to. And I think the governor's announcement today in some ways was meant to give us something to look forward to and hope for when he revised his executive order. I think this is the 10th update to his state of emergency executive order. And it's titled Restart Vermont Phase 1. And the sum total of what it is intended to do is start to allow some economic activity to commence again as under certain conditions. This is not a wide open gate right now where all of our normal activities are being permitted once again. It's very far from that. Don't expect to go to the movies anytime soon. Sporting events, no. Schools, no. Large workplaces with lots of people in them, no. That's not what the governor was talking about today. He was talking about gently easing some of the restrictions under very specific constraints, and I'm going to walk through the nature of what the governor is opening up. And so I spend a lot of my time looking at technical jargon, legal wording, legislation, and so not everyone is as familiar with the way legislation works, executive orders. So I don't mean this to look like story hour with Tim, but I will read a tiny bit and then give my abridged sort of explanation of what that means. And the governor, in his executive order, as he led up to the new permissions for economic activity, the final whereas clause, that whereas clauses are where you say, because of this, because of this, because of this, therefore, this is what's going to happen. The final whereas, meaning the final explanation of all that's about to follow, said, as we move forward, businesses, government, and employees must understand that how, italicized, they work is essential to resuming and maintaining business operations to stay safe and save lives. So that's an indicator that all the things that are going to be allowed in the coming days are all with the mindset of being very careful about the manner in which these activities are conducted and doing it at a very small scale. So the governor has, in summary, on April 20th, which is Monday, much of what I'm about to describe is going to be allowed. Some of it, there's better information today about it. Some we're going to have to wait probably over the weekend and into early next week to have more clarity. But in terms of opening up the spigot, as the governor uses his spigot metaphor, and restarting the economy slowly, he's very clear that it's going to be what he calls a phased approach to reopen the economy. I think that's what we've heard from the public health experts, both nationally, internationally, and locally. So I think that's very good and welcome news. For any of the businesses, nonprofits, government entities, their employees, and their any of them that are going to be operating with the following permissions are under a series of particular criteria or conditions. One of which is that employees who are sick must be prohibited from being on the job. Employees must observe strict social distancing of 6 feet. So anything that's being opened up right now still has to maintain the 6 feet rule. Employees must wear non-medical cloth face coverings. So not may wear face coverings, must wear face coverings, which is actually really important because very few states are actually obligating employees to do this. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. In the case of retail cashiers, in lieu of cloth face mask, a translucent shield or sneeze guard like structure is acceptable in lieu of a mask. So I have been very determined to try to protect people who work in supermarkets and in other retail settings where people are face to face with customers, and have asked the health department and the labor department to come up with requirements for workplace conditions, because it did not seem right to leave it up to each individual supervisor to be playing the role of public health expert and giving instructions to his or her employees. Anyone who's walked into a supermarket knows that half the employees have had no masks or face coverings. The other half do. One person's got a plastic shield in front of them. The other one doesn't. It's been sort of all over the place, and yet every one of those frontline workers deserves a safe work environment. And so I think this is actually very, very welcome news indeed, that it will now be required that there be face coverings and various protections of frontline workers. Employees must have easy and frequent access to hand washing materials. It is not the case in many workplaces that there are sort of dedicated hand washing stations. And this is requiring that it be easily accessible throughout the workplace. It also requires that all common spaces and equipment, including bathrooms, frequently touched surfaces and doors, tools and equipment, and vehicles must be cleaned and disinfected at the beginning, middle, and end of each shift and prior to transfer from one person to the other. So any of the activities that will be opened up are required to have a very comprehensive cleaning program and sanitation program, probably far beyond what most currently have. And then no more than 2 people shall occupy any one vehicle while conducting work. So I think some of what I'm going to say in a few minutes might explain why the emphasis on 2 people in a vehicle when conducting work. One bit of less rigorous language in the governor's executive order says that customers and the public in general are encouraged to wear cloth face coverings when they're interacting with others. In terms of going into a supermarket, some of us have hoped that the sort of no shirt, no shoes, no service rule would apply to face coverings. That is not what the governor's ordering at this point. So now I'm going to turn a little bit to the specifics of which actual businesses or economic activities will be allowed to commence on Monday. And some of it will be more general, and I'll try to provide a little bit of sense of what that might refer to. Others will be, I think, more obvious. So effective April 20th, what will be allowed is what are being called micro crews. Micro crew effectively means not more than 2 people who are performing outdoor work and construction work in unoccupied structures. So let's say you're a painter and you work alone or you work with one other person, you would be allowed to go back and do outdoor exterior painting. If you're a small contractor, 1 or 2 person shop, properly maintaining all the distance, all the sanitation rules and everything, you can be outside. If you work on a large multifamily housing construction project, 2 people can be inside the structure doing construction work. Not 4, not 3, but 2 or fewer as of Monday. There have been a number of contractors who've reached out to me saying, we've got a roof up, so we weren't allowed under the governor's executive order to do something there, but the windows aren't in. Well, if you can pull off the work with 2 people, that will now be able to be commenced. But if it requires a crane operator and lots of other people around, then it's still not permitted. The Agency of Commerce is going to provide guidance for commercial retail operations to resume operations effective Monday. However, as the order says, it has to be done with the minimum number of employees possible. So the idea isn't you've got all 10 people who used to be in the store at the same time. It's the absolute minimum required in order to take phone or online orders and then deliver it curbside. So for the very smallest retailers, this may or may not be a desirable permission to reopen. But for some, it certainly will work. And the Agency of Commerce is soliciting questions from retailers to determine if they can provide more helpful guidance. Also permitted as of this coming Monday, the 20th, services operating with a single worker, such as appraisers, realtors, municipal clerks, attorneys, property managers, pet care operators, and others. They may return to their operations so long as there are never more than 2 people present at a given time. So the person, him or herself, the lawyer, the appraiser, and a client, but no more than 2 people. So they can go back to work. That's pretty much the key permissions. You'll get the sense that these aren't large employers who are going to be going back to work. You didn't see anything about restaurants and bars and movie theaters and mid-sized companies who were not on the previous essential worker list. Really what it's talking about is 1 and 2 person operations. Now, I had a couple questions already today about whether this would include hairstylists and spas and things like that from people who are really desperate to get back to work. You cannot, in those professions, have a 6-foot distancing. I mean, the haircutting seems like to be a stretch to do from a 6-foot distance. Spas, certain spa services, I should say, very impossible to see how they're done with 6-foot distancing. So they do not seem to be open at this time as a result of the governor's latest executive order. So that's the summary total of the governor's executive order. There are a couple other pieces that I wanted to touch on from the order, and this relates to the retail operations. This is a little bit of extra information that came from the Agency of Commerce. In terms of retail operations that would be allowed, there's basically 3 criteria. And I'll begin the first. Retailers, including those that operate in an outdoor setting, may conduct limited operations such as curbside pickup delivery, delivery services, and warehouse or distribution operations in support of curbside or delivery. All orders must occur over the phone or online. No in-store transactions are allowed. Only the minimum number of employees necessary to support curbside pickup and delivery are allowed at any one store, site, or location. So while this does start to open things up, clearly the intent is to keep it very restricted, and it will continue to be enforced in the same way it has, with some enforcement mechanism with state police and others who have gone and checked out, for instance, the lodging industry to see who was following the rules the last time. Some of it's complaint-based. And then largely what we're hoping for is just the honest compliance with the governor's order and state law. So this easing up is really important because, as I mentioned in previous updates, we have to be gently easing the economy, opening up the economy again, while constantly being vigilant about the public health numbers. Because the moment if we see another spike breakout somewhere, we don't want to be constantly jerking the economy back and forth, where we're open, then we shut it all down, open, shut it down. The transition costs, as we're seeing with unemployment right now, are too high to go through that at this point. So it'll be a slow process of allowing more and more activities, and people throughout the state have been amazingly patient. And while there will be disagreements about the level of stringency, Vermont is being recognized throughout the country for its readiness to start easing things up, because we have done so much to flatten the curve and suppress the spread of this virus. The last thing I want to mention today before I wrap is that I mentioned and I emphasized the word that people working in these allowed economic activities must wear face coverings, and that there must be hand washing, either alcohol-based bottles or soap and washing stations, and that there has to be cleaning being done frequently throughout a shift. And the important thing is those are all requirements now in order for these economic activities to be occurring. I emphasize how important that is because at the federal level, it has really been quite pathetic, their level of protection for people who are in workplaces right now. And I think the best indication of that to me is OSHA, which is the Federal Workplace Safety Agency. They have guidance for the manufacturing industry workforce. No problem so far. It's got a number of bullets. I won't read down them, all. But at one point it says, allow workers to wear masks over their nose and mouth to prevent spread of virus. To allow them to work as if that is a public health stride forward is really pretty abysmal, in my opinion. The idea that you need to even encourage them to allow workers to have face coverings to protect themselves and protect others is kind of ridiculous. I believe that these should be requirements until we're through this. But that's why I'm so heartened by many of the science-based approaches the governor has taken. And I hope that we'll all be able to get out of this sooner because of our compliance with these orders. So I'm going to wrap now. As I said, Monday I'll be answering questions that have come up this week and some over the weekend. Tuesday I will be focusing on mental health professionals. Wednesday I'm going to have a very special guest, which I hope you will very much tune into. And look forward to catching back up Monday. I hope people are able to take a deep breath and put your mind to something else for a while. This has been a stressful month plus, something that none of us have really ever endured in our lives. And I want to say how grateful I am that people have been so committed to protecting not just themselves, but taking actions that protect everyone else. So thanks, and hope you have a great weekend.